Hello, and welcome to the Orthodox Landmarker. Today we are going to start a series where we seek to charitably refute the information presented in the YouTube video entitled A Charitable Assessment of Landmarkism. Before we begin, though, please go back and watch our first video. It's called Old Landmarkism versus Neo-Landmarkism. It lays the groundwork for a proper understanding of why landmarkism is historically the most ancient view of ecclesiology. Here we go. Now first, we picked this video because when you type landmarkism into YouTube, this video is almost top of list and has raised some excellent questions that we can give sound answers for. Second, this young man lays out his case as to why landmarkism is incorrect. But after listening to his arguments, it is evident that he really doesn't understand landmarkism historically. Also, he cites several facts that are incorrect. This is not surprising. Most churches that call themselves landmark are not practicing what the original landmarkers taught in the 19th century. And because of this, they've really just distorted this ecclesiology. And so it is our hope that we might be able to more fully explain the Orthodox position, that perhaps this gentleman and his viewers would come to a better understanding of it down the road. We believe that this position is correct, both historically and biblically. And in these videos, if you stick with us, we will show why we believe this to be the case. Today, we're going to do a preliminary video to refute some of the information laid out in the beginning of this man's video. It's evident that this man has not done due diligence prior to posting this assessment. Now, why do I say this? Well, take a look at this clip.
So what is landmarkism? I like to think of landmarkism, and by no means am I an expert. I am not a doctor in terms of this particular doctrine of ecclesiology. So you would have to read men like William Downing or maybe just J.C. Settlemyer. So those are some guys who are contemporary who have written and supported landmarkian ecclesiology to one extent or another.
This gentleman starts by acknowledging he isn't an expert in this subject. I suppose one doesn't need to be an expert. However, notice he instructs his viewers to read J.C. Settlemyer, a man with whom I am well familiar. And if you get a chance to read J.C. Settlemyer's book, it's called Landmarkism Under Fire. I would highly recommend this book. It exposes neo-landmarkism for what it is, a departure from the orthodox and historical Baptist teaching regarding the constitution of the church. He also recommends a man named Downing with whom I am not familiar. Now, why would these writers be our first choice? Case in point, why not read the original landmarkers of the 19th century? It seems inconceivable that anyone would assess a topic without reading from the original source. It would be like assessing the teachings of Christ by reading Romans, while at the same time neglecting to read the Gospels themselves. He recommends reading men who write about landmarkism when we have a great deal of their original writings available to us. The original leaders of this movement are men like J.R. Graves. He was the prime mover. J.M. Pendleton. He wrote the tract, An Old Landmark Reset, which, if you want to, you can pull it up online and just read it for yourself. Also a man named A.C. Dayton. If you want to know about landmarkism, you must first read J.R. Graves' own book. It's called Old Landmarkism. What is it? What is it? In this book, Graves lays down his reasons for what was really a bringing Baptists back to the historical doctrines of the church. Why? Because in 1846, Baptists were drifting into Protestantism, and Graves saw it, and he sounded the alarm. Baptists are not Protestants. We will explore this in a future video. In the meantime, read his book. Next, our YouTuber says this.
One of the positions is very, very new. When I say it's historical, I only mean to say that it goes back to about the 19th century. And it really exists as a reaction to the downgrade controversy during that time.
Because he hasn't read Old Landmarkism, he doesn't realize he has made a pretty large error here. Here are the facts. In 1887, Spurgeon, also a Baptist, printed a series of articles denouncing liberal theology in his paper, The Sword and the Trowel. The articles declared that this new theology had put the church on the downgrade. Notice, the downgrade happened in 1887. I want you to keep in mind that Baptists have always rejected infant baptism, the technical term being paedobaptism or baby baptism. Baptistic people have always held to the New Testament teaching that believers only should be baptized, infants being unable to understand and believe. Acts 8:37 would be a good reference. Now, here's the testimony of J.R. Graves regarding landmarkism. Quote, in 1846, I took charge of the Tennessee Baptist paper and soon began agitating the question of the validity of alien immersion. As a side note, alien immersion means immersions or baptisms performed outside of Baptist churches by persons who are in no way connected with Baptists. Graves continues, and the propriety of Baptists recognizing by any act, ecclesiastical or ministerial, paedobaptist societies or preachers as churches or ministers of Christ. This agitation gave rise to the convention which met at Cotton Grove, Tennessee on June 24, 1851. Of all Baptists who were willing to accept and practice the teachings of Christ and his apostles in these matters. In that convention, 5 questions were discussed, and the decisions embodied in the famous Cotton Grove resolutions, which attracted attention of Baptists throughout the whole South. Now, do you see the problem here? How could landmarkism be a reaction to the downgrade controversy, it being initiated 36 years prior to it? Landmarkism was well in motion long before the downgrade. In fact, in his book, Old Landmarkism, you will find the stamp with the published date of 1880, 7 years before the downgrade. Hopefully, a retraction will be forthcoming. Now, there is something we need to mention here. Graves was pointing out to Baptists that since the Catholic Church was an apostate church, therefore the Protestants had the origin of their baptisms from that institution, and thus were unbaptized. Therefore, Protestant baptisms were also invalid. This is exactly what happened in the Donatist controversy, which began in 311 AD. We will look in detail at the Donatists at a later date. But the Donatists ended up refusing to recognize or accept any baptisms from the Catholics. This was also a repudiation of the Catholic Church as being a true Church of Christ, which, of course, as you can imagine, infuriated the Catholics and led to a great and bloody persecution of the Donatists. They rebaptized anyone wanting to join their churches that had been baptized as a Catholic, even their clergy. Hence, the Donatists were then called Anabaptists, which means re-baptizers. The Donatists sound a lot like what Graves was advocating. This is one proof that landmarkism is an ancient practice. Now, an explanation. Why the name landmark? What's the relevance there? Graves says this, quote, the name of Old Landmarker came in this way. In 1854, J.M. Pendleton wrote an essay upon this question at my special request. The title was, quote, Ought Baptists to Recognize Paedobaptist Preachers as Gospel Ministers? End quote, which I brought out in tract form and gave it the title, An Old Landmark Reset. For biblical reference and context, go to Proverbs chapter 22, verse 28. It says there, Remove not the ancient landmark which thy fathers have set. Graves continues, this calm discussion, which had an immense circulation in the South, was reviewed by many of the leading writers, North and South. And they, by way of reproach, called all Baptists old landmarkers, when those ancient Anabaptists, whom we alone represent in this age, were content to be called Cathari and Puritans, which terms mean the same thing as old landmarkers. So the name landmarkers was in use 33 years before the downgrade of Spurgeon. It seems almost inconceivable that this gentleman has not read the tract An Old Landmark Reset, written by J.M. Pendleton, for it was this tract that got the entire ball rolling regarding old landmarkism. And it's easily accessible online. Anyone can access it. If you have any interest, I would recommend pulling it up and reading it just to get some historical context. I would like to keep these videos short and sweet, maybe around the 10-minute mark. So that'll be it for now. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about landmarkism, and if you stay with us, you'll learn even more. So look for the next video in this series. Thank you.